broadcast of this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel, Braintree District Council Committees. This channel has been set up to make sure that anyone can observe our democratic meetings. Please therefore remember that this meeting can be watched anywhere at any time by anyone with access to the internet. There are subtitles available on the YouTube broadcast. These are generated by YouTube. The Council is not responsible for these subtitles nor their accuracy. There is a delay between the meeting and the YouTube broadcast of approximately 30 seconds. Webcasting officer, please can you commence the broadcast and confirm that it is proceeding? Thank you.
Hi, Emma. Yes, I can confirm it's started.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee on Tuesday, the 1st of September 2020. Before we commence with the proceedings, I can confirm that the Council has adopted some basic etiquette rules for its remote meetings, and for ease of reference, these are as follows. Please only speak when the Chairman invites you to do so. Members, please let the Chairman know that you wish to speak through the chat function. The Chairman will introduce the speakers in the order that the request to speak has been made, unless there is a point of order at which we will give way. Please minimise all distractions while you are in the meeting. Members are asked to mute your microphone when not speaking and to consider turning off your video feed if there is interference on the broadcast. Please bear in mind that there may be a lag between speaking and other attendees hearing you, so please bear this in mind when wishing to speak. Presentations and images will be visible on the screen, and please indicate via the chat function if there are any problems. When referring to a report, please quote the page and paragraph number. There is no business in tonight's meeting in private session. However, please can remind members that it is your responsibility to ensure that your venue and connection is private. If you lose connection at any point and are unable to rejoin the meeting, then please call the meeting facilitator. You have been provided with details to do this. Please only use the chat function for the purpose prescribed for requesting to speak or on a point of order. The chat function is subject to the access to information regimes of FOI, EIR, and is also subject to data protection, rules of defamation, and the Council's Code of Conduct. To assist with managing the chat function for this meeting, agenda items will be included as markers. I can confirm that the meeting is quorum. The Planning Committee consists of the following members. The Chairman is Councillor Mrs Wendy Scattergood. Vice Chairman is Mrs Iona Parker. The committee also consists of Councillor Abbott, Bowers, Cunningham, Horner, Johnson, Mann, Mundy, Ritchie, Mrs Spray, Unsworth and Wrench. Apologies for this evening's meeting have been received from Councillor James Abbott. The officers of the meetings are Chris Padgey, Planning Development Manager, Neil Jones, Principal Planner, Manny Corbishley, Senior Planner, Andrew Martin, Senior Planner. Alison Webb is clerk in the meeting and will be reading the submitted statements of public question time where the public question time speaker is not present with us this evening. And my name is Emma Wisby. I am the meeting facilitator. I will now hand the meeting over to the Chairman, Mrs Wendy Scattergood. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you very much indeed. Good evening, members, and good evening to those watching on YouTube. I am Councillor Wendy Scattergood and I'm chairing the meeting this evening. Members, as we've had many meetings on Teams and we've got the hang of a meeting on Teams, tonight is our first Zoom meeting. As you're aware, this gives the public the opportunity to read their own statements. I'm just hoping that this is all going to fall into place and go to plan, but if it doesn't, please bear with us. Can I just remind everyone that when we take the vote on minutes or likewise, silence will be taken as assent during this meeting. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Abbott. Councillor Unsworth is not with us yet. We will wait and see if he does join the meeting. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda, having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? I have Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. An NPI relating to 5B, item 5B, the college site. There's an NPI in two aspects. I was employed on the college site in the very buildings to be demolished for 9 years as director. And a second aspect, I'm a trustee of the Friends of the Glebe Wood that's mentioned in the report. But MPI, I approach the application with an open mind, and therefore will stay and vote.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to declare two non-pecuniary interests, please. First of all, on item 5A, the land south of Gilda Terrace, as a member of Great Notley Parish Council, who were consulted on this application, I did not participate in any debate at Great Notley Parish Council, therefore did not pass any comment, therefore will remain in the meeting and vote. And item C, item B, the Braintree College of Further Education, Church Lane. Perhaps a slight over-declaration, but I think in the interest of transparency, I chair the Education Skills Board, and at Braintree District Council we do work with the college relating to matters of skills and further and higher education. Therefore, members of the college staff are known to me, but I haven't had any conversations regarding this or any other planning application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Two NPIs to declare. The first is in agenda item 5A, land south of Gilda Terrace, as Vice Chairman of Great Notley Parish Council. When the item was discussed, both myself and my fellow Planning Committee member were removed to the virtual waiting room and had no bearing or no sway on the discussion or what they formulated as part of their consultative response. So I will remain, debate and vote that item. And also in Part B, application at Braintree College of Further Education, my son is currently a full-time student at that college. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Does anyone else wish to declare an interest before I move on? No. Members, we now come to item 3, and I'm afraid the minutes of the 18th are not ready yet, so we will be looking at those at the next meeting. Item 4, public question time. I have no general questions, so we go on to item 5, the planning applications. We have one item in Part B, and this item is coming to us because the applicant is related to a member of staff. It is a minor application and under normal circumstances would be delegated to officers. Does anyone wish to move that application?
To move, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Cunningham, you're moving it.
To move, yes, thank you.
Does it find a seconder, please?
Yes.
Councillor Mann will second.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. So it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application. I will be putting that to the vote. Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
4.
Councillor Horner. Councillor Horner.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
4.
Councillor Mann. Councillor Mann, you're muted.
Apologies. 4.
Thank you. Councillor Monday.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
4.
Councillor Ritchie.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
4.
And Councillor Wrench.
4.
Thank you. That application has been granted. For anyone watching on YouTube is wondering what we've done. That application under our rules had to come to us because the applicant is related to a member of staff. It meets all our planning policies and would normally be granted under delegated powers. We have therefore granted it without discussion. We now come on to the planning applications in Part A. The first application is application 1801065 out, land south of Gilda Terrace and north of Flitchway, Braintree. For those with the agenda, it can be found on pages 6 to 57. And I do have several speakers on this application. And the first member of public that I'm calling to speak on this application is Mrs. E. Wood, and she is speaking on behalf of the No Brook Green Action Group. Mrs. Wood, are you there and available?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. Thank you. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak at the consideration of this application, representing, as we do, the opinions of a large number of local residents who are vehemently opposed to the granting of this application. I know you will have read with care all of the individual objection letters and seen even more who have signed the petition. Those objections are founded on sound planning criteria, and they demonstrate on a human level the significant adverse impacts that this proposal would have on them, your residents. And that is reinforced by the fact that both Rain and Great Notley Parish Council object to the application. Our position is that we wholeheartedly support the recommendation of your experienced planning officer, Mr. Padgett, who has recommended this application be refused. We agree with the reasons he has carefully outlined as to why this application does not pass the relevant tests that you must supply, and we implore you to accept his recommendation. We also ask that this application is considered in light of the vastly reduced housing need figures. The committee are invited to consider the decision of the Secretary of State regarding the much larger Brook Green application, where this same parcel of land was considered. Many of the very good reasons that Brook Green was refused have equal force in this application. There is a real risk that if this application is granted, it would lead to piecemeal further applications for further development, equating to all or a significant proportion of the Brook Green application, as many of the factors identified as the reasons for the refusal for that would be negated by this development. And we know that the applicant refers to future phases. Whilst there is a need for more housing in the district, this does not trump all other considerations. The most important policies for determining the application carry significant weight, and it follows, therefore, that conflict with them must also carry significant weight. The site has been independently assessed as having low capacity for residential developments. It's outside of the development boundary. It should be protected as a valued landscape for its own sake and as a valued area of countryside. There would be significant adverse impacts on landscape character and visual amenity, including unacceptable impacts on uses of the Flitchway Country Park. The great benefit is that you, the local council, know this area and that you know for yourselves the negative impacts that it would cause. You know that the applicant has, in his reports, sought to be non-representative in his assessment of visual impact, and this is made clear by the council's own report, which is far fairer. Although there could be mitigation in the form of tree planting, which has been suggested, this would not be sufficient to overcome the issues, and moreover would itself negatively impact on the visual amenity in terms of the countryside setting of the Flitchway by obscuring the countryside views. The committee does not, I'm sure, need any reminding of just how important the Flitchway is to residents of the district and indeed those from further afield. And never has this been more true than in the recent months of COVID and the lockdown. The key elements in considering the site include the recreational value of the landscape combined with its proximity to urban Braintree. Local people speak not only of the recreational value of the landscape, but also of the importance of being able to see open countryside, hear their footsteps and birdsong, and enjoy a sense of well-being and tranquility away from a built-up area. It is the sense of openness and countryside that's important, not just specific viewpoints. And the landscape in the vicinity of the site provides a means of quickly and easily accessing and appreciating countryside, which is out of the ordinary compared with other landscape areas around Braintree. And that would be significantly compromised if the development were permitted. Coalescence. Although there is no current development plan policy which seeks to maintain a rural edge to the settlements of Braintree and Rain and ensure their separation, concerns about coalescence have underpinned both past and emerging local plan policy for good reason. The unrestricted sprawl of Braintree into surrounding communities and villages is not a desirable thing, either for planning considerations nor for local residents. The site has an important function in providing a rural edge to Braintree and in separating the two distinct communities. The proposal would significantly compromise that function. The tranquil countryside surrounding the Flitchway represents a vital aspect of the identity of the village of Rain and is a vital aspect of the user's sense of leaving one developed settlement and arriving into another. And it's precisely this that led to it being part of a proposed green buffer. The assessment of coalescence must be viewed taking account of the Rain Gardens development north of Rain Road. Combining the two together extends the urban edge of Braintree almost to Rain. Gilda Terrace houses do not properly form any planning justification for this development. They were built when different planning laws applied, and in any event are a single string of small cottages which, whilst visible from the road, are unobtrusive from the Flitchway due to topography and distance, and they are a vastly different proposition to this application. So in conclusion, we would say that any arguable benefits of the proposal, which are few in number, are either generic or arise because of the need to mitigate the adverse impacts of the development, and that the benefits of the proposal are significantly and demonstrably outweighed by the range of significant adverse impacts demonstrated here. And in those circumstances, we would ask that the planning application be refused. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mrs. Wood. And thank you for your statement. And the next person wishing to make a statement is Councillor Mrs. Hooks, and she is speaking on behalf of Rain Parish Council.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members. The Parish Council thanks you for this opportunity to support the Planning Officer's recommendation to refuse this planning application. The village of Rain and the west of Braintree and the beautiful Flitch Way has had the Brook Green proposals hanging over its head for many years now. The land in the proposed development area has already been dismissed at a planning appeal in 2019, and this new proposal offers no new benefits to the community while still destroying the area. With this application, yet again, the developer is trying to circumnavigate the local plan. The land in question was rejected in the call for sites exercise and is not included in the emerging local plan section 2. Although much will be said about a lack of 5-year housing supplied by the developer, this is not a good enough reason to accept all speculative development, especially when the adverse impacts of the development would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits that it would bring to the area. It is also concerning that this developer is trying to get his original application passed by stealth by getting smaller parcels of land planning permission at a time. The development of this land would lead to the coalescence between Rain and Braintree. This is unacceptable and is against Braintree District Council policy, and is also stated by the Secretary of State in refusing the appeal by the same applicant for the land north and south of the Flitch Way, Podsbrook Road, Braintree, that the proposal would appreciably diminish the sense of separation between the settlements of Braintree and Rain. This application diminishes the same green wedge that is used to protecting the existing settlements. The detrimental impact on the Flitch Way and the surrounding landscape character is huge and unacceptable. The Flitch Way is a linear country park. This means that it should be an area for people to visit and enjoy in a countryside environment. The building of the proposed site would essentially make the scenic Flitch Way a footpath next to a housing estate, with views from the Flitch Way changing from a rolling open field landscape to houses. Unfortunately, this kind of change has occurred further along the Flitch Way, namely at Takeley. These developments have had such an adverse effect on the country park that Braintree District Council should not allow this to happen in our district on our watch. Although the consultee reports do not agree with the Parish Council and local residents, there will be an adverse impact on infrastructure, which includes highways, traffic, health and education. Another concern that the Parish Council would also note that the comparator used for housing density is Braintree Town Centre, when the site is just as close to the village of Rain, which clearly has a completely different housing density, as it is a rural area rather than an urban town. Lastly, we have had little engagement from the developer, who did not attend meetings to discuss this new application. So therefore, we have very little confidence in the building of the proposed development. Rain Parish Council thanks you for listening and urges you to support the officer's recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Hooks. Thank you very much for your statement. Thank you. The next person wishing to make a statement on this application is Councillor Paul Ousden. He is the parish council. He's the ward councillor for Rain. Councillor Ousden, please.
Good evening, Chairman and members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. As you say, I'm the ward member for Rain, and I object to this application for the following reasons. The site is part of land that forms the green buffer between Rain and Braintree. Rain is a lovely village with its own characteristics, worth protecting for future generations. The green buffer is there to maintain the integrity of Rain as a village with a separate identity to that of Braintree Town. Without the buffer, Rain would cease to exist as a village and would be just another part of Braintree Town, contrary to Braintree Council's planning policies. If this application is granted, it will be the thin end of the wedge, and there is no doubt in my mind that it will be followed by subsequent applications until the buffer has gone and Brook Green has appeared by stealth. This application is just a mini Brook Green, and we have already fought that battle. Nothing pertinent has changed since then. No additional medical facilities, school places, or extra road capacity have been provided, and the evidence given at Brook Green planning appeal should still be upheld. Rain Road cannot cope with traffic in peak hours now, resulting in queuing traffic. This will only worsen if this application is granted, resulting in more traffic diverting through Rain, as additional vehicles will use the old road from Dunmow to Braintree to avoid the Springwood roundabout and slip road from the A120 to approach the development from Rain instead. More traffic equals more congestion and more pollution, damaging Rain. There will be an adverse effect on the Flitchway, as the rural views and rural feel are impacted by the development. Any proposals now or in the future to tarmac and or light any part of the Flitchway must be opposed. Finally, this site is outside of the Braintree Town development boundary and is land which isn't designated for building development. It was also rejected for development following the call for sites and has had previous applications for development rejected. There is a very high level of local opposition to any development on this site. What further evidence is needed to show the applicant that this land should remain as agricultural land? I urge the committee to refuse planning permission for this site and to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for making your statement. Thank you very much indeed. The next person wishing to make a statement is Councillor John Mckee. He is the Ward Councillor for Braintree West, and he's speaking on behalf of himself and his fellow Councillor Mrs Cunningham. Councillor Mckee.
Right. Thank you, Chairman and members, for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. And I am speaking on as one of the 2 ward members for Braintree West Ward, in which this application for 120 houses sits. I'm also able to speak on behalf of my fellow ward councillor, Mrs Mary Cunningham, who wanted to speak this evening, but I was unable to attend due to a very important previous engagement. Firstly, Mrs Cunningham and I fully support the recommendations to refuse this application, and the reasons for refusal clearly support the residents of Rain Village and Braintree Town, in particular the residents in West Ward. These communities are most affected by the decisions taken this evening. Furthermore, we both support the need for more residential development and support the Garden Communities Plan to deliver the necessary housing growth. However, this application is in the wrong place for 3 reasons. Firstly, the site was part of a much larger attempt by the same developer to develop this area of countryside with 1,600 home application that straddled the Flitchway. This application was refused by Planning Committee in 2017 for 7 good reasons. The decision to refuse was upheld by the Secretary of State because the benefits were outweighed by the harm to the countryside and the loss of separation between Braintree and Rain. This application was made while the appeal process was in progress in June 2018, and if it were to be approved, it would become the thin end of the wedge for the very reasons that the Secretary of State upheld the earlier refusal. 2, the adverse impact on highways and traffic in all parts of the road network in West Ward, directly impacting the long-suffering residents of West Ward and the business owners on Springwood Industrial Estate. The junction of Rain Road with Pierfit Way and Aithrick Road is already a bottleneck that Essex County Council believe is difficult to remediate. Posbrook Road, feeding off the A120 into the western entrance to Braintree at the Springwood Industrial Estate roundabout, cannot cope at present, so any additional traffic will exacerbate this situation. Roads in this area are already gridlocked at peak times. Thirdly, adverse effect on the Flitchway. Access to the Flitchway to the west of Posbrook Road is limited, and most of the users are recreational users. East of Posbrook Road and Flitchway is used as a cycleway or footpath to the railway station, town centre, and school children use for safe access. This portion of the Flitchway past the site is not laid to tarmac, thus is weather dependent, and if this were ever to become a viable cycle and footpath to be used as part of the transport network, it would need to be improved to the same standard as the more urban portion. This is not planned by either the applicant or Essex County Council, so the only transport options will be to use the road network via Rain Road. I'm sure the Planning Committee will in this case support the officer's recommendation and refuse this misplaced application. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Mckee. Thank you very much for your statement. We now come on to a statement that's going to be read by Alison, and this statement is on behalf of Mr. Duncan Powell for Acorn Braintree Limited. Alison, are you ready to read the statement?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. This is
Thank
the
you,
applicant's
Alison.
statement.
Thank you.
The applicant acknowledges that this scheme conflicts with the development plan policies RLP2 and CS5, which together establish development boundaries and strictly control development outside of them. This should not be a surprise. The development boundaries did not plan for anything like the level of housing provision which national policy now requires, and this council endorses. Despite the policy conflict, the applicant says that material considerations indicate otherwise, such that planning permission should be granted in this case. The council cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, and so the presumption in favour of sustainable development under paragraph 11D of the NPPF applies. This means that permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in this framework taken as a whole. It is inevitable that there would be some adverse impacts for a scheme of 120 dwellings in this location, but the whole point of the tilt in the balance is that the inevitability harmful effects of development do not stop development, which is needed from taking place unless there is really is a very good and overriding reason for doing so. The recommended reason for refusal is based on the officer's view that harm to the countryside and landscape is such that permission should not be granted. The applicant disagrees. The Council's independent review of the LVIA at most highlighted some differences in opinion between the findings on the visual effects of the development and magnitude of change to the landscape character, but not to such a degree as to tip the balance in favour of a refusal. The applicant does not accept that the development would lead to Braintree and Rain coalescing in either actual or perceived terms. The proposed development would not result in any significant effect or harm in terms of actual or perceived coalescence when travelling between Braintree and Rain on the Rain Road. By far the largest proportion of people travelling between the two settlements would do so along the Rain Road. Here there would be neither actual coalescence nor any real difference in the ability to distinguish between Rain from Braintree. The concerns over coalescence is a weak point. The benefits of granted permission would be considerable. 120 new homes, 36 of which would be affordable homes, would be a very good thing whether or not the council has a 5-year housing land supply. Further, the 5-year housing land supply calculation is a floor, not a ceiling, to housing delivery, and in line with the government's objective of build, 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 significant weight should be accorded to housing provision within the 5-year period. It is certainly wrong to suggest that housing is unnecessary. The contribution of the proposed development to housing need is a substantial benefit to which significant weight should be given. In conclusion, the proposal is a sustainable and appropriate location for development. There are no objections from any statutory consultees on any technical matters. There is significant betterment for the public due to enhanced and legal access to the Flitch Way and, more importantly, new permissive rights of way around adjacent fields for walking, a very significant benefit. The site will provide much needed market and affordable homes. The council is struggling with housing land supply and currently is deficient in terms of a 5-year supply, and this scheme will greatly assist in addressing the shortfall. On the basis of the above, and in line with the government's build, build, build agenda, there is no planning reason not to grant permission for this scheme. That's the end of the statement. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Alison. Thank you. That brings us to the end of statements on this application. We'll now have the presentation which we made by Neil. Thank you, Neil.
Good evening, members. Right, so as you'll have heard and read from your papers, this is an outline application for development of up to 120 dwellings with all matters reserved on land south of Gilda Terrace and north of the Flitchway in Braintree. Just to pick up on the point that was made in the papers, when the application was originally made in 2018, there was an element of the application or the development site where details were provided and sought approval for the other matters which are now reserved. So it was in effect a hybrid application. So it was seeking to establish a total quantum of development on the site, but actually providing details for part of it. So during the course of the application, the applicant has chosen to withdraw the detailed element. So all we're being asked to assess now is an application for up to 120 dwellings, and like I say, with all matters reserved except access. So moving on to the first slide, this is the red line of the application site. So you can see that the majority of the site is to the south of Gilda Terrace. The access is actually to be formed, as you can see, partly through an existing access to the rear of the properties on Gilda Terrace, but also by demolishing 2 houses to create sufficient space for the required road and footways into the site. So beyond the actual body of the site, we've got a large dogleg red line which runs down here, which is all within the blue line. So the blue line denotes land which is within the applicant's control or ownership. So the purpose of that dogleg red line is to provide a connection or a discharge point to the River Brain. So the SUDS, the surface water drainage from the site, will be held, it is proposed, in an attenuation basin in that corner of the site, just below Summerfields there. And then there will be some means of conveying that water through to a discharge point on the river, where it would be discharged at a controlled rate were development to go ahead. So that explains the rather unusual red line. Just in terms of bearings, at the bottom of the screen, there's the larger sort of Brook Green site denoted in blue, if you like. So you can see that's all the land which is within the applicant's ownership and control, and you can see where the application site, the red line, sits within it. Running through the middle between the 2 blue areas of land owned and controlled by the applicant is, of course, the Flitchway, which you will have heard referred to at question time. So just in terms of sort of wider context, this is from the application pack. So you can see here a plan which shows the application site in a slightly wider context. So you can see where it sits between Braintree and Rain. Also, you can see this is partly included because of the topography. So you can see we're in sort of a sloping on the slopes of a river valley here, coming down from Rain to the river, which is just to runs to the east of the site here. So you can see a sort of slope running down through the site there. Just in terms of wider context and points of note, so again from the applicant's application pack, you can see extensive public rights-of-way network in the surrounding area, so not just the Flitchway, but various footpaths running north and south, but none within the application site itself. And also you can note heritage assets or designated heritage assets. So you can see on the eastern side of Rain, you can see the purple lines denoting the conservation area, and then you can see blue dots which show the location, or blue and yellow dots or orange dots depending on your colour, showing grade 1 and grade 2 listed buildings. Probably of most note is Nailinghurst, which is just down here, so to the south of the Flitchway. So as you'll have read in the report, officers have carefully considered the points that were discussed and considered by the Secretary of State and the Planning Inspector in the Brook Green appeal. And in terms of heritage assets, Nailinghurst was the one that was considered most relevant to the Brook Green development. So this is a separate consideration that we have to have here. So we can't simply rely on what was said in the Brook Green decision, but in terms of points of references and looking for material considerations in terms of heritage, certainly Nailinghurst was considered to be the designated asset which we needed to consider most closely. So that's a little bit more of the context of the site. So the site itself is laid rough grassland. I think hay crops have been taken off in the past. Certainly long grass when I went out most recently, and you can see these are just a couple of photos looking down across the site to slightly lower level. So you can see on the left hand side that's looking down towards the properties on Gilda Terrace, and you can see the gap there, which will be the part of the entrance into the site. And the photo on the right just shows looking down towards the housing at Sunlido Square Gardens and Springfields. So the only details before us in terms of approval, the details for which approval is sought, are the access arrangements. So here you can see the access that's proposed. So various highway works within the existing highway to create a right-hand turn lane, a ghosted right lane, which would allow traffic to wait to be able to turn in if it needs to. And then you can see a 5.5 metre wide carriageway coming into the site with 2 metre footways to either side, and that would be the access arrangement coming in. The properties along Gilda Terrace, which currently have parking or garages to the rear of their properties, that access would be maintained, although obviously it would be their access would be coming off this new access road rather than the track or lane that's there at the moment. So, and just in terms of access arrangements, as I did mention when we were talking at the start, the access arrangements to create the space to create this access, it would be necessary to demolish 2 houses, which is within the applicant's control or ownership. So when we're looking at up to 120 houses, I guess in terms of net new housing, we would have to allow for the 2 properties which need to be demolished to create this. So we'd potentially be looking at a net of 118 new dwellings as a maximum. So those are the access arrangements. In terms of other plans, you'll have seen that there was a number of different plans and supporting documents submitted. Perhaps most pertinent in terms of establishing what might go if development were to come forward is the parameter plan that's been submitted. So you can see the access road coming in, landscaping areas shown to either side, and a landscape buffer to the rear of Gilda Terrace. Then you can see a development parcel, which is I'm going to struggle with my colours now, a sort of pinky colour, blancmange colour maybe, around the outside, which will be for housing up to 2 stories. Then you've got a darker block in the middle, which is shown to be housing, but with building heights of up to 2.5 stories. No ridge heights specified, but it gives an indication of the scale of development that's proposed. And then to the south and along the western boundary, you can see public open space and structural landscaping areas are proposed. You'll note that there is a gap between, so to the south, there is a gap between the red line of the application site and the Flitch Way. So that land is within the applicant's ownership or control, and that's why they are able to propose pedestrian and cycle access to the Flitch Way from the site. So whilst the whole, so the potential landscaped area which we can control through the application is shown here in the parameter plan, there is an area beyond that which would be outside the application site, albeit we could secure that pedestrian and cycle access to the Flitch Way. So the applicant also produced a concept master plan. So again, this wasn't for approval, but I guess it's illustrative material to try and show how they consider the site could be developed. As I said when we started the presentation, there was a parcel which was originally proposed for detailed approval, which officers expressed a number of concerns to the applicant during the course of the application, and it was following the communication of those concerns that the applicant switched to a reserved matters application, outline application with all matters reserved except access. So this is really just for illustrative purpose, but you can see the potential up to 120 units there. You can see an allowance has been made for the SUDS attenuation in the bottom left right-hand corner, and an area of public open space and landscaping to the south, which does include a play area. So moving on, again, this is just part of the illustrative material that's been produced. So this shows just how one of the parcels could be shown. So the applicant suggesting fairly typical arrangement of housing in terms of semi-detached and small terraces, parking either on plot or in parking courts. But like I say, officers certainly expressed concerns about the design approach that was taken, so that this isn't for consideration. Illustrative landscape plan, which really just shows in a little bit more detail the areas of public open space and the planting. I guess the key points to point out, you can just see to the south there, the purple line. I think I'm really struggling with my colours tonight. I'm almost become colourblind, I think, which shows a connection point to the Flitch Way. So like I say, that could certainly be secured, and that is referred to in the report as part of the heads of terms for Section 106 if there were to be one. And again, this is just, again, illustrative material, but it shows some of the key streets. So you can see the top section there just shows an illustration of what the main entrance could look like, with trees to either side behind the footways. But I think the main reason for including this was the bottom section, which just gives an illustration of how the open space could be set out and how that would be separated from the Flitch Way. So you can see the Flitch Way on the left-hand side there, and you can see the development with houses facing onto the open space to the right. So I think there's obviously a number of issues that we've covered off in the report. I think rather than try and cover them all, members will have read those. I thought it was perhaps most helpful to concentrate on the main issue, I think, for officers, which is the landscape impact. So there is a landscape and visual impact assessment which the applicant has prepared. The council has engaged a consultant to review that to make sure it's a robust piece of work and to make sure that it's an accurate and fair summation of the situation. So the landscape consultant we've used is the consultant that we used for the Brook Green inquiry, so somebody who's very well versed in the site and is aware of the issues. So there are a number of vantage points which the applicant has used to try and give an illustration of the impact, the visual impact of the development. So I haven't tried to reproduce all of these, but I have tried to reproduce the ones which I think most illustrate our concerns with regards to landscape impact. So the first few are with regards to views from the Flitch Way. So here you can see a panorama from that sort of vantage point, which is to the west of taken on the Flitch Way from the west of the site, and then you can see an actual viewpoint photo of what's there at the moment. So you can just see this is looking down towards Gilda Terrace, so you can see the land falling away there and the houses down on the lower land towards the bottom. And then these are graphical illustrations that the applicant has produced to show what the development would look like after a year and also after 15 years. So you can see some planting has been put in initially, so there's some hedge and some trees you can make out there, and then the applicant is suggesting that after 15 years you would be looking at more a situation in the bottom image there where the housing is more screened. I think certainly looking back at the Brook Green appeal and also a point that's picked up in question time, we don't think that simply planting trees or vegetation around a development to try and hide it is appropriate. Part of the value of the Flitch Way, we think, is the sense of openness around it, the sense that you are in the countryside and that you are generally removed from built development from people's houses. So I think here you can see, even after 15 years, even if the vegetation was to take as well as is indicated in this image, you would still get the sense that the housing's there. And even, you know, if there were points where you wouldn't get glimpses through or you wouldn't have that sense, you would still have to consider things like noise and stuff, just people going about their daily lives, vehicles moving and so on. All of these factors would detract from what is currently a walk which takes you through open countryside, once you're quite quickly away from Braintree or Rain, and where you can enjoy that openness and that countryside sense. And I think certainly that was something that the inspector noted, that even where the Flitchway is quite enclosed by existing vegetation, there are still glimpses through to the countryside beyond, and it's that those glimpses of the countryside which weight was attached or value was attached to, and we think that's an issue which needs to be carefully considered in this decision. So just moving on, so this is another vantage point from the Flitchway, this one more to the south. This is probably around the location where the pedestrian and cycle access could come through. There's a sort of route which I think people have formed themselves over the years. You can see some orange sort of web fencing on the floor there, where access has been denied previously, but people have chosen to take that down and come through. Different here, different way of showing the housing, but you can see in the bottom image there, the dotted yellow lines give a wire frame or wire line illustration of what the housing would look like. So again, you can see there is vegetation there. So it's not that you have necessarily particularly open views through to the countryside beyond, but certainly your perception of the countryside would change. There would still be open space beyond the vegetation here, but I think you would certainly get that sense of housing beyond. So, and this is another one, again from the Flitchway. This is further along to the east. So this is looking back from Clap Bridge. So again, you can see certainly parts of the development would be obscured from here by the existing vegetation, but you would sort of get glimpses through from parts. And then Rain Road, these are the last couple that I just picked out. So this is looking at the existing access arrangements to those properties on Gilda Terrace. So you can see the house there, or the pair of houses as was originally, I think, on the right-hand side of the entrance. You can see in the image below have disappeared to allow this space for the access to be formed. And here you can see the housing running back up the land. I think both of these images are quite important, illustrating the point that the land here is rising from Rain Road. So it's not simply a question of it being a flat site where housing might be hidden largely behind the housing on Gilda Terrace. It is going to go up as the land rises back through the site. And again, this is also from Rain Road, but this time from the west, looking back. So I think at question time, the applicant was saying that there would be no perception of coalescence or no sense of Braintree and Rain growing closer together. I think this image would tend to suggest otherwise. So you can see here the wireline image at the bottom showing the yellow line showing the housing. So you can see, you would certainly see as you're approaching Braintree from Rain, as you're coming down that hill, you would get that sense of housing behind. And as I said, I think as you come down the hill and you're looking at Gilda Terrace, you'll certainly get the sense of development in depth behind Gilda Terrace because of the topography and the rising land. So heritage, just to come back to that briefly, what we've tried to do with the report is pick out the key issues and how they would judge during the inquiry. So I think Councillor Mckee mentioned there was 7 reasons for refusal when we refused the larger Brook Green site. Obviously not all of those would apply. This is a different site and it's been assessed differently, but there are elements of which we think carry forward or have a material consideration here. So in terms of heritage assets, Nailinghurst and the setting of that was considered to be the main issue with the larger Brook Green scheme. As you can see, Nailinghurst is to the south of Flitchway, quite some distance from the application site. The Council's Historic Buildings Advisor is satisfied that there wouldn't be, or there doesn't need to be adverse harm on the setting of a listed building from this development at Gilda Terrace. So that is one of the ways that this is different. This is a smaller scheme. We have assessed it as such. We have assessed it against the issues that we looked at last time with Brook Green and how the inspector and the Secretary of State looked at it. So Nailinghurst, we don't think is an issue in terms of setting here, and we don't think there's any adverse impact on any other designated heritage assets here. So just by way of an update, since the report was written, just to confirm that we have had a response from Natural England on the habitat regulations assessment. We didn't think this would necessarily be an issue, but just for completeness, it does fall within one of the zones of influence. So we do need to carry out this appropriate assessment to make sure that there's no adverse impact either as a result of this application or cumulatively with others. So with our appropriate assessment that we've submitted, Natural England are satisfied with the mitigation that's proposed, which is provision of on-site open space and connections to public rights of way, and also a financial contribution, and that with that mitigation secured, there wouldn't be an issue there. So that's just by way of a quick update. So in terms of a summary, the council can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. We've accepted that, so the tilted balance would apply. The presumption in favour of sustainable development. I think the applicant said, we shouldn't be refusing this unless we consider we have a very good or overriding reason for refusal. So we've set out why we think that is the case. We certainly do, and we have considered it on that basis. So we have set out in the report, we think we've got conflict with the development plan, with the draft local plan, particularly the green buffer policy, which is emerging, which is sort of picking up on that point about the particular value that the council and the local communities place on this land and this countryside between Braintree and Rain. We certainly think there is that issue with separation, diminishing the separation between Braintree and Rain. Again, looking at the appeal decision, the main points that the inspector was looking at there and the Secretary of State was looking at were what sense you got of the separation when you were travelling along the Flitch Way and along Rain Road. So those are where we've looked to consider, and we think both of those, whether you're walking along the Flitch Way or cycling along the Flitch Way or driving along Rain Road, we think this development would diminish that sense of separation between the two settlements. There is harm to the character and the appearance of the area, as we've set out in terms of landscape, and we've tried to talk about a little bit more about that and explain that with the LVIA that the applicant produced tonight. We've also got the loss of best and most versatile land, which is fairly common, so we don't think it carries significant weight, but is still an adverse impact, and also conflict with the NPPF. So there are some benefits. I think it's fair to say that this is a smaller site, so there is a smaller number of houses, but there's less benefits as well. So I think the principal benefit, and I think that was said at question time by the applicant, the main benefit here would be the delivery of market and affordable housing. We would accept it is a relatively accessible location. There are some economic and social benefits which we've set out within the report. There is relatively generous provision of public open space when measured against standard, although we would say that the provision of open space is more as a response to the Flitch Way and the particular constraints of the site. And there are Section 106 contributions, although these are generally just what is considered necessary to mitigate the impact of the development, so not significant benefits in their own rights. So there are two reasons for refusal. So the first one being with regards to landscape impacts. So we think this, as we've said, this does conflict with our adopted and emerging plans, and that we think when weighed against public benefits that we've identified, we do think the harm outweighs those benefits. So we think that's reason for refusal. There is a second reason for refusal, which is the absence of a Section 106 agreement. So usually we would require a development of this site to provide various planning obligations, and we would usually secure that by a Section 106 agreement. We haven't got an agreement in place, and whilst that could fall away if there were appeal, that should be cited as a reason for refusal, and we have set out within the report the heads of terms, so the items that we think would need to be covered within a Section 106 agreement if it were to be considered acceptable in that point. So members, that's my presentation. I think just a couple of points which came up during question time, which I hadn't covered in the presentation, but perhaps just quickly if I can touch on. Traffic is obviously, and highway concerns is a big issue. So something which has been carefully considered. There were a number of issues raised with the transport assessment which was submitted originally. The County Council highway officers did question a number of the elements of the transport assessment, so some of the factual data and some clarification around some of the modelling that had been done. So revisions were made. The Highway Authority's view is that the TA, the transport assessment which was submitted, was a robust piece of work which did allow them to assess the impact of the development. Clearly, 120 extra houses is going to increase traffic on local roads, no getting away from that. But as members will be well aware, the test is whether the impact would be severe on the local network, and the Highway Authority's view is that it wouldn't be. It would add to some queues, but the impact itself wouldn't warrant refusal. They are seeking some mitigation by way of a contribution towards Springwood Drive roundabout, which is an acknowledged issue, but no sort of highway reason for refusal. Just with regards to density, which was another point which was picked up, 120 dwellings, we think is probably around about 35 dwellings a hectare, something of that order. I think the design and access statement shows a number of different developments around the district or around the town, including the town centre. So I don't think the applicant's suggesting that they replicate the town centre in terms of density here. I think it was just to try and give some ideas around different sorts of levels of density. The level of density that's been suggested here is probably towards the upper end of what we get on these developments on edges of towns. It's not wildly out of kilter, and I don't think would be a reason for refusal in itself. So that was just one thing that was picked up. So I think that's all that I have to say on the presentation, but obviously happy to answer any questions should members have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for an extremely comprehensive presentation. Members, I'm just going to ask you to bear with me for one moment. With Teams, I was able to see chat all the time. Now I can't if I want to watch the presentation. So I'm just going to have to check who wants to speak before I start. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Neil, for a very detailed presentation. I can see there are quite a few of my colleagues want to speak, so I'm going to keep my comments fairly brief. Despite the applicant's valiant attempts to make a case for this application, I'm not persuaded. The 3 points I want to make are, first, that this does for me, without a doubt, mean that if this development were to go ahead, it will close the all-important gap between Braintree and Rain, something that I know objectors, including the two speakers this evening, the lady from the No to Brook Green Action Group and Mrs. Cox from the Parish Council. It is really important that throughout our district that we do maintain these green spaces between developments, and this would say it would close the gap. It's also something that the inspector made mention of in the recent appeal when she refused the larger Brook Green development, and it's something that we should take note of. Secondly, I do believe that the development would impact adversely on the Flitch Way. The Flitch Way is a very key feature of this part of the district, very much loved, I would say, by those who use it. And I think the development would alter the quite rural aspect of the Flitch Way. There's talk, I believe, from the applicant of, this would improve access to it and improve the use of it. And I don't believe that that is the case. There is actually, I don't think, any proposals to improve pathways and so on. So I'm not quite sure how that would be achieved unless it was in sort of in discussion with the county council, because I think some of their land is involved here. So, but just generally, it would spoil the view and the use of the Flitch Way for those who use it regularly. And finally, for me, it's a harm to the character of the area. I know we don't have a 5-year land supply, and most of us on this council do accept that we need new homes. However, it doesn't mean to say that this committee or residents have to accept development on sites which are unsuitable and which are going to have an adverse impact on the landscape, and where the advantages will be far outweighed. The harm that will be done will far outweigh the advantages. So there will be an impact on this green space, which, as I say, it's so important to separate the town of Braintree from the village, and I stress village of Rain. I'll leave it there, Madam Chairman, because I know there are others who want to speak and I dare say have other points to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Councillor Mann, would you like
Thank
to
you,
speak?
Chair. I mean, we have to accept that we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, but that doesn't mean that every site sort of dotted around the town perimeter is suitable for development. This site, I don't think, is suitable or desirable. It didn't make the cut at call for sites. It's been long assessed as having high landscape sensitivity and therefore a low capacity for built development. We are committed to try and minimise coalescence and consolidation between built up areas, and to preserve the setting of these areas. We don't want Rivenall to go into Witham. We don't want Highgarret to join with Bocking Village. We don't want Braintree and Cressing to coalesce, and we don't want Braintree and Rain to become as one. The developer sees our views on coalescence as a weak point. I think the reverse, that we need very strongly to preserve that separation and to defend green buffer policy. So yeah, housing's got to come, and we've picked the sites that we think around Braintree are much superior to this. So I'm happy to move officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Does it find a seconder before I move on?
I'll
Does,
second.
Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I heard you. Councillor Ritchie, I have you to speak next anyhow. So,
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I will be supporting officers' recommendations for refusal for this site, namely for a number of reasons that both Councillor Mann and Councillor Spray mentioned before me, but also there's a lack of section 106 even at this stage. It would have been wise for them to have indicated where they would have liked to have assisted with local amenities, sporting, recreation, etc. And there's a lack of that too. But I think what this also does for anyone watching via the YouTube channel is shows that when we do feel like we have a strong case to rebuff an approach like this, we will, as a planning committee, do so. We're often accused of not doing our bit. This time around, we certainly are. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you very much. And there's not a lot more I can add than what has already been said, not just by member colleagues, but particularly by the excellent contributions in public question time this evening. And I think I have a certain amount of a totally biased sentiment for this area, I have to say, for this part of town. It's because the area of separation between Braintree and Rain is where I was brought up. So I've seen immeasurable changes in that area. Parking that feeling to one side and looking at it from a planning perspective, just like to take you on a little ramble, if I may, a very brief one down the Flitchway from Braintree. And I was very pleased that officers had pictures taken just after Clap Bridge. The only unfortunate thing was the weather couldn't have been better, because I have to say the view and the pictures that would have been taken on a sunny day would are really quite special. But if you walk along the Flitchway there, just past the bridge, the trees thin out and you can actually see into the countryside. You can see quite a lot. If you look to I stood there and pondered on a warm evening recently, and I saw deers running. I saw rabbits jumping. I could have gone off the path and joined the wonderful network of other paths that would have taken me into Great Notley Country Park. And I could have seen the cygnets on the lake there that have developed a certain notoriety in recent weeks and months. My point is, it's a wonderful example of how you can have the very best of the countryside in quite an urban developed area. But Madam Chairman, it is so vital that we don't test and challenge that balance of nature and the green environment with built up areas any further in this area. Our whole policy approach through the developing emerging plan was to ensure that degree of separation remained between Rain and Braintree. And it's absolutely vital that we take a robust planning position regarding this application and refuse it. And I'm very pleased to support that recommendation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Thank you very much indeed. I have now got Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, our starting point is the position on the 5-year supply, and as has been pointed out, we are now in the tilted balance territory with adverse impacts needing to significantly outweigh the benefits. It seems to me that there are two the main 2 points are the effect on the landscape character, in particular the Flitchway, and also the point about maintaining the separate identities of Braintree and Rain. As you know, I'm not from the Braintree area, and actually I don't know the Flitchway. So I took it upon myself yesterday to walk from Rain to Braintree along the Flitchway and back again. I know it was quite helpful to see the photographs actually, because obviously those photographs were taken in the winter, whereas now we have leaves on the trees and sort of greater tree cover. There definitely are views from parts of the Flitchway towards Rain across the fields towards Braintree. But I do think as you go further towards the site itself, the Flitchway does go into a slight cutting and the views are more obscured. So I'm less confident about the views from the Flitchway. Although I would say I completely acknowledge, and I could see it evident from my trip yesterday, how well loved that route is, and how vital it is for people who live in Braintree and Rain. I completely agree with that. For me, the really big issue is the one of coalescence, and I think it was well put. I think probably by Councillor Eusden, it's really important that the village of Rain retains its separate identity as a village and doesn't become too closely associated with Braintree. Nothing that's wrong with Braintree, but we just must keep them separate. And I do know that there's not, when you drive down Rain Road, there isn't much opportunity to glance through and see the difference. But when you look at the map, and you walk along the Flitchway, there is a clear separation, and it's not a huge area between Braintree and Rain. And I do think by just eroding or making the gap smaller, it is actually going to have quite a significant impact on that question of coalescence. So for me, that is the most important point, and I will support Officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Parker. Does anyone else wish to add anything new or further? Neil, did you wish to add anything? Yes, Neil would like to come back. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just come back on a couple of points that members have raised. So the point on the section 106, I think Councillor Ritchie raised. I mean, it's not unusual where applications are heading towards a refusal. Officers don't tend to sort of push for a Section 106 agreement. I think it's slightly difficult in this point. I think it would have been helpful if the applicant had perhaps set out within the planning statement, you know, their proposed heads of terms at least, to give some sort of impression of what that might be. But anyway, we've done that within the committee report. I think Councillor Parker just making the point about the different sort of views that you experience as you come along the Flitch Way. So I think absolutely, I think that's something which everybody acknowledges, and that's something which was discussed at length at the inquiry. So that there are sort of quite open views of the countryside in some places, like Councillor Cunningham was talking about, and there's other places where there's, you know, cuttings or vegetation where it's actually more enclosed. But even in those locations, and even during sort of summer in full leaf, you do still get sort of that sense of openness, those glimpses through to the countryside beyond. So we think that's still relevant. If I can just quickly go back to the presentation, just the last point I wanted to come back on. Councillor Spray mentioned about the access to the Flitch Way. So if I can just sort of share that image again, I think there's a couple of points. So I guess the most the clearest way that it improves access is if you were on the Rain Road and you wanted to get to the Flitch Way. At the moment, you'd be walking down sort of a private drive between the properties on Gilda Terrace. You'd be hopping over a gate or a fence or something, and you'd be crossing private land. Now, I think, you know, going back to Brook Green, there's been a lot written about, you know, the fact that the existing landowners, it's a bone of contention for them that the public have treated this area and the fields around as public open space when it's not, it's private land. So I think, in fairness to the applicants, what they're trying to do here is say there would be a formal legal route. You know, you could walk through the development and through that path to connect to the Flitch Way. So it does provide a new connection. I would suggest the connection is probably most of benefit to the people living on this development rather than anybody else, perhaps the people who live on Gilda Terrace. So I think, in fairness, that's perhaps where it would improve access to the Flitch Way. I think just on one other point, so the field, this existing field to the west or the left-hand side of the screen, is also in the applicant's control. So within the application, there was a sort of walking route shown around the outside of the field, which I think has been referred to as a sort of, you know, permissive right or permissive right for the public to walk over. I mean, that didn't form part of the application. That wasn't sort of explicitly listed within the application documentation. I mean, I would also say it's outside the application site. It's outside the red line site. Potentially, you know, rights could be secured around the outside, but given there's an existing agricultural field in the middle, and given there's a sort of history of issues between sort of agricultural operations on the field and public use, I think a walking route around the outside of that particular field, I'm not really sure what benefit that would have. Maybe some for the residents who would be living on this development. Not a lot of benefit, I would suggest, for people walking along the Flitch Way. I think if you're walking along the Flitch Way, you're walking along the route. You're unlikely to go off here to sort of detour to walk around the field. But just to pick up on that point that Councillor Spray made about improving access to the Flitch Way and improvements to public rights of way, that was, I think, what the applicant was alluding to. So I think that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Well, it has been moved and seconded that we refuse this application. It has been moved by Councillor Mann and it has been seconded by Councillor Ritchie. I'm now going to put that to the vote. Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
And Councillor Wrench.
For.
Thank you, members. That has been refused unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And thank you, Neil. Members, I have I hope you all got the email explaining that I'm now going to move on to item C. This is application 19023304, land southwest of Oak Road, Housestead. Because we do not have a speaker on item B, but we do have someone that wishes to make a statement on item C, and to prevent them delaying and waiting in the waiting room while we discuss another item, I've decided that we'll do this next. So I'm going to ask Miss Mckee Parsons, who's the agent for this.
Yes, apologies, Chairman, to interrupt your speech. Would you like to thank the members who attended for public question time?
Sorry.
Councillors
Well, I did
Mckee.
thank them after each one spoke, so I thought I'd done that. So I would like to thank them for coming and actually trialing it. It has made it more difficult for me. I hope it's been made easier for you, because all I could see was you and I couldn't see the chat line, so I don't know what my members are asking me to do. Perhaps this is something we can look at and get rectified. Thank you anyhow for all your statements. And I hope you are all happy with the result, except for the agent.
Members, could I sort of just invite Councillor Anne Hooks, who's still in the meeting, if she'd like to leave the meeting now, we would be grateful. And obviously any member who has left the meeting, they can continue to observe the meeting through the Council's YouTube channel. I'm just going to bring forward your next speaker, Mckee Parsons from the waiting room, Chairman.
Thank you.
Mrs. Parsons, could you just please unmute your microphone so we know you're connected to the meeting?
There we go. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you very much for bearing with us as we go down this new process. I'd just like to hand back to the Chairman. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. This brings us on to the application, as I said earlier, which is application 19023304, land southwest of Oak Road, Housestead. For those with an agenda, can be found on pages 97 to 120. We are now going to have a statement from Ms. Mckee Parsons, who is the agent from Pegasus Group. Thank you. If you would like to make your statement now, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Members, you have before you a scheme that your officer's report has thoroughly assessed and concluded as being consistent with national and local planning policy. The proposal is to replace an approved but unimplemented convenience store with 5 new homes. As your officer has explained, the principle of this alternative use of the land is acceptable. The convenience store is not protected by policy or planning condition and was not considered to be a planning benefit when the approved development of this site was considered. This is probably why this use is not carried over into the allocation for this site in your emerging local plan. Residents in the area will be able to access an existing convenience store complete with post office within a 10-minute walking distance. The Town Council's objection to the loss of this facility cannot therefore be substantiated. The Town Council also object to the loss of amenity space. The wide area of open space along the frontage of Oak Road is outside of the red line and is therefore retained. The proposed houses occupy the area of the convenience store and its car park only. There is no loss of amenity space. As your officer has explained, the wider site that this application is part of delivers 283 of the 292 homes that were approved in outline and identified in the emerging allocation. This represents a shortfall of 9 homes at this site, which this proposed site scheme will help to address. Members will be aware that the impact of the 292 homes on local facilities was a consideration when the outline scheme was considered. This latest proposal does not breach the 292 home figure, and therefore the impacts have already been taken into account and deemed acceptable. Our initial affordable offer was to provide 2 times 2-bed affordable homes as part of the 6-unit scheme. Following discussions with the Housing Enabling Officer, a request was made to substitute these 2 units for the 4-bed unit that is now proposed. This had the effect of reducing the scheme from 6 to 5 units, and with it, the proportion of affordable housing went from 33% to 20%. This reduction was considered by officers to be appropriate, as the provision would meet an existing demand in the local area that is currently going unmet. This is an important material consideration that justifies the 20% offer included within this scheme. The applicant has worked closely with officers to ensure that the scheme delivers a high quality design that complements the wider area and respects the amenities of local residents. Appropriate garden widths and depths are provided and windows have been positioned to avoid overlooking. The noise condition that is proposed provides further protection for residential amenity. The delivery of 5 additional homes on a site allocated in an emerging plan for housing and delivering an affordable home that meets an identified local need secures substantial and obvious benefits that weigh heavily in favour of granting planning permission. Members, you can accept your officer's recommendation, safe in the knowledge that there are no technical objections to this proposal and that the scheme will deliver a high quality development that will complement the character of the area. I therefore respectfully request that you accept your officer's recommendation and approve this scheme without delay.
Thank you, Mrs. Parsons. Just on behalf of the chairman, just having a few technical issues, could members just be patient with us one moment? Mrs. Parsons, members did hear your presentation. Just unfortunately, the chairman has just had some technical issues. So if you wouldn't mind bearing me for one moment, I just need to check the chairman's link and then we will just reconvene. So if you'd just like to bear me for one moment, please. Thank you. I'd please ask members not to discuss the application further at this time. Thank you. Cannot participate in this meeting at the moment. Councillor Parker, as Vice Chairman, I'm ever so sorry to ask you to take on this matter in these circumstances. Would you please kindly take over the chairing of this meeting while we re-establish the Chairman's connections to the meeting? So far, members have heard the public question statement by Ms. Parsons. All officers, all members have had a written copy of the statement as well. So, Councillor Parker, could I please invite you to take over this part of the meeting? At this stage, you've had the public question time presentation, and we would be ordinarily at the part where you invite the officers to do the presentation on this application. Is that okay, Councillor Parker?
It is, Emma. Oh, good evening, members. Right, so yes, the next part is to invite Neil, I think, who's going to do the presentation on this application. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. I'll just start the presentation off. So this is an application which is for 5 dwellings with associated parking, landscaping and access arrangements. So it's a full application. Again, just to clarify, as we did in the report, when the application was originally submitted, the application was for 6 dwellings. So this is a revised description of development, but it has been advertised as such, and that's how we're treating it. So the site is land southwest of Oak Road in Housestead. So it's part of the Oakwood Hills development, I think, which is currently being built out by Bloors. So here's the location plan. So there's two plans. So the actual location plan for this application is on the right-hand side of the screen. So you can see the red line in the right-hand side of the site there next to Oak Road. So you can see a vehicular connection or a point of access to the highway coming in, and then you've got a roughly rectangular shape area of land. You'll note there is an area between the red lines. We'll just show that with a cursor, and the highway. So that's what the agent was talking about at question time. So there is an area of open space beyond this red line, which is covered by the outline permission and the reserve matters. So that's part of the landscaped area which would run adjacent to Oak Road. So just by way of further context, down on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, the red line there is actually the red line for the whole of the Oak Road site. So that's what was granted the outline consent a number of years ago. So the northern part, north of this field boundary here is being built out by Bloor, so this area here, and this area at the bottom here is currently being built out by David Wilson Homes. So, and the part that we're looking at is just this area here next to Oak Road. So a little bit by way of background, just going back to when Gladman originally made the application. So I think we've all seen a number of Gladman applications over the years, probably more than we'd all care to have seen, but they all tend to include a development framework plan, which is what we can see here. So this is what Gladman was saying they thought could happen with the site in terms of open space, SUDs, and crucially the reason for including this plan was this area here, where Gladman was suggesting that a convenience store could be provided, and indeed the outline planning permission granted permission for up to 292 dwellings and the convenience store. The area that we're looking at, just so for consistency, is this area over here by Oak Road. So that's just background in terms of outline. After the outline permission was granted, we had reserve matters submitted by Bloor for this northern parcel. So you can see that here. So this is the layout that we had. So you've got the A131, the main road between Braintree and Housestead at the top here, Oak Road down the side here with what was the previous edge of the town, a retained hedge field boundary along this boundary here. And in terms of the store, the convenience store, through the reserve matters, what we agreed with Bloor was that the convenience store would be relocated from this area up here, which is where Gladman suggested it might be sensible to put it, to over here. We thought this was a better location in terms of providing access to existing residents who lived on this side of the town. So if the store did come forward, but it would be more accessible to existing residents to walk and maybe cycle there. So that's what was given consent when we granted the reserve matters approval. And just again, for completeness, this is the southern parcel. So this is the David Wilson Homes scheme. So you can see this is where the convenience store is going, just to the north of their site. So there's a SUDS attenuation basin here, and their housing sort of rounds here. And this is, again, Oak Road here. So this was the original scheme. So you can see 6 dwellings in total suggested, a pair of semis and 4 detached houses. Officers had a number of concerns in terms of the layout and the arrangement of the houses and how they related to each other. That was communicated to the applicant during the life of the application. The discussions followed, and it was agreed that a revised scheme would be submitted, and that's what we have before us for approval tonight, for 5 dwellings. Now, just to pick up on the point about the affordable housing, which the agent made at question time. So originally, no affordable housing was proposed with the application because they thought it wasn't necessary because of the size of the site. Officers took a different view and thought it was part of a wider development and should contribute towards affordable housing. So that was agreed in principle by the developer. They then suggested, or offered, I should say, 2 affordable houses, which would have been 33% of the total of the 6 dwellings. The housing enabling officer at the council at the time the application was being considered identified a particular need for a larger property. There was a particular need on the housing list for a larger property. So we requested that that be provided, or one of those types of units be provided in this development. So that's a 4-bed, 7-person house. So that's the biggest unit that you can see there, just next to the road. So that's the affordable unit. So in terms of quantum, so we've got one out of 5 houses, so 20% affordable housing. But I do have to stress that the applicant has provided this housing because it's what officers have asked them to provide. So rather than continue to provide two units of smaller size, we've asked for this one larger property, which, like I say, is born of particular need on the housing list. So that's the background there. So the change in affordable housing and layout happened around the same time. So that's how that's happened. So you can see we've now got 5 detached houses with garden sizes which are all okay, parking largely on plot next to the houses, with the exception of this house here, where you're parking just at the end here, and then you'd be walking down the path to your front door there, or through your garden, potentially through the gate there. There is a substation proposed just in the centre there, but we think that was always going to be provided as part of a convenience store. It's needed as part of the wider development, and we're satisfied that the houses have been arranged in an appropriate manner in relation to that. So we think this layout now works. There would potentially be some issues with overlooking of neighbours' gardens. It is quite tight, although it hits standard in terms of garden sizes. So what we have done is we've worked with the applicant to come up with a situation where we've got some elevations which won't have windows to protect the privacy of others using their gardens. So I'll show you that as we go through the house type elevations. Just the other point to note there, so we're stopping short of the retained hedge and the trees, which act as a buffer there. So you can see we're stopping some way short, as was originally envisaged. And we've got this landscape area, which is just outside the red line site here, but would be between that and Oak Road. So that would be consistent all the way along the road. So we've got different house types, but they are consistent with the architecture on the main Bloor development. So this is plot 3. So these are first of all the houses along the main road as you come into the site. So this is a Flintstone house. So you've got brick contrast around the windows, and you can see rear elevation down here. I've got a blank elevation to protect amenity, but you can see all the rooms have got windows, albeit on sides or fronts rather than backs. But you can see we've got a chimney, so that's one of the design features which carries through from the main development. Then the next house, so you can see a more conventional arrangement with windows front and back. And then another house with a rear elevation here where we've had to protect privacy. So you can see we've got a detail there to add some interest in terms of sort of false windows, because that would be viewable from the public realm. But again, we think the architecture works and is again consistent in terms of sills and headers and the porch details, the chimney again, and the materials are consistent with the unapproved site. And again, another one there. And then this is the affordable house, so the larger house. So again, a sort of similar approach in terms of architecture and materials. So this is the street scene that's been provided. So this would be as you come in. So this is as you're coming in from Oak Road here to the site. This is how you'd see the houses arranged in composition. So we think an interesting street scene, and one which works with the houses together, but with some variety of materials as well. And as you can see down here, we've just got some indication of the material. So a couple of different types of red brick and the Flintstone, providing some variety. So suitable choice of materials. The site was is currently part of a larger development site, so a little bit difficult to see. It is there behind the hoarding. Couldn't really get in there because of construction activity, but you can see the hedge and the trees just beyond it. So this is the divide here. This is the David Wilson site. So if you're looking at the photo on the left-hand side of the screen, these are the David Wilson houses just over here. And then this is looking up Oak Road. So this is the site here, and this will be the access in. The road here has been formed already. So again, that's the hedge on the left-hand side being retained. So the houses on David Wilson's site here, and the new houses, the 5 units, will be here. And then this is looking up Oak Road. So you can see the housing, you can see is coming down Oak Road as law build out, coming down towards the back of the site. So, and this is just again, so in context, this is the David Wilson site here, the houses, the hedge, and our site is just here. And then that's an image of some of the houses on the other side of Oak Road. So again, the sort of the wider context. So just by way of summary, the application site has an approval. It's part of a larger site, and the reserve matters does show it as being an approved location for a convenience store. Is part of a larger site, but even with this increased number, the 5 extra units, we're still below the maximum number that was originally envisaged by the outline permission, which was 292. So we're not exceeding that headroom. The site is allocated simply for housing, so they're in the draft local plan. There is no allocation for a convenience store. That doesn't mean the convenience store couldn't be built. It just means we haven't captured that through the local plan. So we don't have any conflict with the current local plan in respect to the store or the emerging plan. And I think crucially, the previous permissions didn't impose a condition or a requirement, but the convenience store was provided. So it's allowed it for it to be built if the developer or a developer wants to build it, but it hasn't required it. So we haven't got a situation where a developer's not doing something which we've required them to do. There's no objection from any statutory consultees other than Hampstead Town Council. It's unfortunate nobody from the Town Council is speaking tonight to clarify their position. Originally, there was no objection to the application. When we reconsulted them with the revised plans, they did object, principally around loss of amenity, which we take to be the loss of the convenience store, which they considered to be a public benefit. We understand that, well, we understand how that view could be arrived at, but I think that the point to stress again is there is no requirement that the convenience store be provided. So when the council granted the permission, we didn't require the store actually be provided. So we consider housing in this location to be an appropriate form of development. We don't think there is a requirement for the convenience store. So we don't think suddenly the whole development becomes unsustainable or unsuitable because of the lack of the convenience store. As we've said in the committee report, Abel's Road, there's a very busy co-op store which actually has a post office as well. Probably 10 minutes walk for most residents from this development to get there. Very much a cherished community asset. And I know when we had the original Oak Road application, some people who use the co-op store were actually worried that another convenience store could affect their store and its retention. So something else to bear in mind. But certainly in terms of access to services, if you were looking to buy a pint of milk or a loaf of bread or something during the week, there is a store within reasonable walking distance of the site where you could get that and access a post office as well to boot. So we don't think the loss of the convenience store is sort of fatal. So as always with these situations, it's a question of planning balance. So we've looked at benefits and harms. In this case, unlike the first one, we think the benefits of the proposal do outweigh the limited harms, which really don't amount to very much in this case. So we are recommending that this application is approved, and we're asking for a resolution to grant subject to section 106 to secure the affordable housing. I'm pleased to say that the 106 agreement has been drafted and is agreed, and if it's approved tonight, it will be signed within the coming days and completed. So the developer is very keen to get on and has shown willingness to meet officers' demands in terms of design and also to progress the legal agreement, which I think is very good news for members. So if members do approve tonight, I think we can expect to see the houses built in good time on this site. So that ends my presentation, but if members have any questions, as always, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you very much indeed. I still seem to be having a few problems, but we will overcome them, I believe. Can I thank Councillor Mrs Parker for taking over, and can I also assure Miss Parsons, although I didn't hear her statement this evening, I read the whole statement this afternoon, so I was fully aware of what she was saying, as long as she stuck to the script that she'd written and sent in. I have the chat line when I had to come into the meeting, so I've lost the chat line. So I only had Councillor Monday who had registered to speak. If anyone else is registered, could you re-register? And in the meantime, I will take Councillor Monday. Councillor Monday.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Neil, for your detailed presentation. And at this point, I'd like to acknowledge respect for the discussions between the developer and BDC officers to reduce the original proposal to that which we're looking at today. Now, isn't the addition of the 5 homes that I have a concern about? It's the loss of the convenience store for the total development of what will be, should this application be granted, of 288 homes. The alternative store on Abels Road is a small store, whilst it does have a post office, and I acknowledge that. And I also acknowledge that it's only 10 minutes walk for the majority of the residents of the upcoming development. That 10 minutes will be enough to encourage the use of a car to get to this or any other store. And the Abels Road store is located off of a curved part of a standard residential road. I went down there today, and an opinion of one of the members of staff that I just happened to bump into, there was no predetermination here. When I walked from the proposed site to the Abels Road store, the view was that it was very congested, gets very congested very easily, and it does so on a daily basis. This store doesn't have dedicated parking for either staff or any of the customers that wish to visit or use that store. And that is unlike the convenience store that is part of this proposed development that is now obviously being proposed to take away. That store had dedicated parking, enough probably for staff or customers. The loss of the convenience store will definitely put pressure on the Abels Road store, and as well as encourage traffic into Halstead itself and the creaking infrastructure that we have in our town. And sadly, it's for these reasons that I cannot support this application, although I do respect that there are no planning grounds for refusal of this application this evening. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Monday. Councillor Mrs Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I do remember this application coming before us on outline. I think it was one of the first applications that we had to deal with, which was on an unallocated site. And yes, it was, it was a bit of a shock really, because it was nearly 300 homes, which we weren't intending to build on that site. And quite a long way really from the centre of town. And I do actually remember that the convenience store was something that certainly made me think, well, at least the residents won't have to drive all the way into Halstead to get their shopping. They could just nip to the corner shop and buy the few things that they need for that day. So it was something that played upon my mind at the time. And I do listen to what Councillor Monday said, and I do to agree that it is a loss not to have the opportunity of a store on this site, especially when we're trying to encourage people not to use cars, but to walk to the nearest shop. But having said all that, I do also accept what the officer said, that we don't have sufficient grounds, I don't think, to require the developer to try to market this site for a convenience store. And I do think this is a sort of marker really for the future, that if we feel that something like this is important, that we must make sure that it can be secured in a way that will be legally binding. So I think we are rather stuck on this particular application, and I don't think we can have the grounds really the legal grounds to enforce a convenience store. just turning to the application itself, the point about the affordable housing, I completely note what has been said. I think although this falls below the normal threshold in this particular case, given that there is a strong need for a larger house as advised by our housing officers, I think that actually would be a benefit and is something that weighs in its favour. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Parker. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I can't see any real planning reason to object to this application. Yes, I accept it might have been nice to have had even a small retail store on site, but my understanding is that there was no specific allocation for such a store in the application for the homes. So although it's a loss, I guess you could call it a paper loss rather than an actual planning loss, because there was no allocation for a store. Instead, what we have is 5 homes. I think the designs are good. I quite like them. I'm actually particularly pleased to see that the larger house, that the 4-bedroom one, is the affordable home. I think, if I remember rightly, we are actually in need of larger sort of family size homes in terms of affordable housing. So I think that's very good to see. And I will move officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Does it find a seconder, please?
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a question, really. On the site in general, the other site that we gave permission for, what about electric charging points? Are there any considerations for that to be discussed at all? I mean, we're moving towards this for most places. Is that something that we should consider?
Neil, would you like to come back? Sorry.
Yeah, I can do. So there isn't any proposals for electric charging points as part of this application. Neither are there on the adjoining site. So I think that's I would say that's, yeah, the previous application, the larger site, is a product of its time. So when we were granting approval of the larger site, that wasn't an issue which we were alive to at the time and dealing with. What I would say in terms of this application is a parking arrangement would be conducive should residents in the future want to have charging points put in. So there's parking on plot, so we're not reliant on parking courts or something where that sort of provision would be difficult. But in answer directly to Councillor Johnson's question, we haven't got any electric vehicle charging points captured or as part of an approved plan as part of the proposal.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick question, please, to Mr. Jones, if you could answer this. Bearing in mind they indicatively planned for a convenience or some type of retail store, is there any way that we can kind of pick this up in the future so that if this was to be a repeat occurrence by another developer, we could actually condition that has to be carried out, so that rather than being a situation that we are now where rightfully or wrongfully people make assumptions that there is going to be a convenience store built, that it can actually be carried through to the end and constructed.
Yeah, so it's okay to just come back on that, Chair. Yes, we can try and do more, and we are doing more, I think, on other applications. So a couple of examples that spring to mind: Forest Road in Witham, the Bellway development, that has got a convenience store or convenience store element within it. We didn't require, there's no requirement that actually be provided, but there was a requirement there that the developer had to carry out a marketing strategy. So they had to show that there was going to be a store space available to try and attract a tenant in. And we made sure that the marketing strategy was pretty robust. And when they did the marketing, they did actually find a tenant, and that has now been provided. So we've done that. And I think Chris Padge's application, or the application that he looked at after Panfield Lane with the local centre, again, that's something that's been taken into account, and there's a strategy there whereby the developer has to show service land is available and that the marketing is undertaken. So we can do more. It's not always as simple as saying you have to open a convenience store prior to occupation of 200 dwellings, because that's difficult. You can maybe get a building or land provided for the purpose, but actually getting an operator to take the business on is sometimes too much. But we can do more. I think probably what I would say to members is, as an advice point, and the way officers would look at it is, if when you're looking at planning balance and you're looking at benefits, you're looking at benefits from something like a convenience store, or I don't know, a community hall or something like that, then I think if you're taking it as a benefit into account in planning balance, you need to be confident that it's going to be delivered. So you would need a condition or an obligation or something to try and make sure it's delivered. I think looking back at this application when we considered it before, notwithstanding Councillor Parker's recollection that she considered it as a benefit and was weighing it up in her mind when she made the decision, when we looked at it in terms of reporting it to members, we didn't think it was something which had to be provided, and we didn't attach weight to it in the benefit. So I think if members in the future think something's important, they need to make sure that it's identified as such in the report, and that officers have done something to try and secure it, so that we don't have a repeat of the situation where members feel uncomfortable with something like this, perhaps.
Councillor Parker, unfortunately the chairman has lost connection again. Could you please take over the chairing of the remainder of this item? You are actually next in the chat function to ask a question in this matter. So if you would kindly take over for the chairman, I'd be most grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, happy to ask myself to answer a question and to take over chairing. Yes, Neil, just a quick question actually on the layout. I wonder if you wouldn't mind just showing that picture which shows the layout and the gardens.
That one.
Sorry. Going back even further, it's probably like the second one, that one there. What I just wanted to ask was the house in the top left hand corner. It's just that garden seems a very odd shape with that little leg going behind those two parking spaces. Is that
sort of area there?
Yes. Is that satisfactory?
I would say it's not ideal. I mean, I think in an ideal world, we'd want sort of regular shaped gardens. I think we've had to accept it, or as officers, sorry, we feel we've had to accept here that we're working to make efficient use of the space that's available. I think in terms of usable space, that might be okay for some storage. I mean, I accept you're not going to want to sort of put your deck chair in there and sit out there or something like that, but it might be a space for growing or a space for storage. So I don't think ideal, but I think I think it could provide some value to residents in the future, and the bulk of the garden is of a more regular shape, which is more usable. So overall, we would say, I would consider that to be acceptable. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, sorry. See, where's my chat function? Here we go.
Councillor Parker, sorry, and no other members have expressed a wish to ask any further questions. So I don't know if you'd like to ask members. Are there any members who'd like to ask questions who's not previously asked a question?
Yes. Any other comments from anybody? No, I think not. So now I have to remember who moved. This has been moved and seconded.
It was moved by Councillor Mrs. Spray and seconded by Councillor Johnson.
Okay. So Councillor Mrs. Scattergood, do you want to take over from now? Or,
no, you finish this one.
All right then. So we'll go to the vote then. Let me find the list of members.
Councillor Parker.
Yes.
Sorry, Councillor, although it would be highly unusual, I'm more than happy to read the names out of the members for you to assist you to get through this vote, if that helps you in any way.
I think I'm all right. Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you. So it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application. So I'll go through the list of members. So Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
Lonely against.
Okay. Councillor Ritchie. Sorry.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Cattergood.
For.
And Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
Finally, Councillor Wrench.
For.
Right, thank you very much. Remember that application has been approved. Shall I now hand back to Councillor Scattergood, I believe?
I will do my best. I keep losing internet connection. I'm sorry, but there's not much I can do about it. So we will now go back to the application B, application 19017434, full Braintree College of Further Education, Church Lane, Braintree. This can be found on pages 58 to 96. There are no statements on this application, so I'll go straight to Mel for the presentation. Thank you, Mel.
Apologies, Chairman, for interrupting. I know you thanked Ms Parsons for her public question time statement. She has just left the meeting, but on behalf of the members and yourself, could I just thank her for her participation at this evening's meeting and thank her for enduring with us as we've had these technical difficulties. Thank you. Apologies, Mel. Thank you.
Sorry. I forget everyone can see me. Right. There we go. Good evening, members. Can you all hear me? Oh, please don't all answer. Actually, I shouldn't have asked that question. Right, the application before you this evening is a full planning application for the demolition of the existing college buildings, structures and facilities, and the erection of a 75-bed care home and 19 age-restricted lifelong homes for those of 55 years or over. So the second slide here shows the application site outlined in red. I'm sure most of you will be aware it's the Braintree College site, which fronts onto Church Lane, just off of Bradford Street. To put it in context, to the south here is the existing Church Lane doctor's surgery, which doesn't form part of the application site and will be retained. And then across here is the mini roundabout and Coldnailhurst Avenue, which runs off to the west. Slide 3 shows the existing buildings on the sites and their various heights. You're probably all aware this darker, this grey building here is the 6 or 7 story college building. This is one of all of these buildings will be removed as part of the redevelopment of the site. So turning on to slide 4, this is the proposed site layout plan. So the site's roughly splits into 2, with the existing access here just beyond Coldnailhurst Avenue, which will serve the 19 residential units off of a single spine road that then terminates in a T-junction and 2 sections of private drive. And then to the south here, the existing access that used to serve the staff car park for the college, but also serves the doctor's surgery here, will serve the care home. There is a small area of car parking off of the access and then a larger portion here at the back. This plan here just shows you the roof plans. there is a mixture of dwellings proposed on this portion of the site, from bungalows, 1.5 storey and 2-storey properties. The other key thing to point out from this drawing is the large area of public open space that is to be retained at the frontage of the site, which is fairly visible from Church Lane. The number of mature trees within here that are being retained and will be publicly accessible by both residents of this portion of the site, but also from the care home. The next set of slides show you elevations and visualizations of the care home itself. So the elevation here at the bottom, the smaller one, is the elevation that you would see from Church Lane. However, the most of this would be obscured, to be fair, by the existing tree belt, which will be to be retained to the front. And then these are the two other elevations. This is the elevation that you would see if you were standing at the doctor's surgery. And then this is at the far end near the main car park to serve the care home. I think the detail is shown better in these visualizations that show the palette of materials that have been brought forward on the design of the care home. As set out within the officer report, there's been extensive work between officers and the applicants to achieve a suitable design, both of the care home and also the residential dwellings on the northern portion of the site. And then these visualizations show the other two elevations. So what you can make out here, probably more so than on the plain elevations, is there are some outside seating areas at first floor accessed from day rooms. There are a number of day rooms throughout the building, rather than perhaps sort of more traditional care homes where there would have just been one room that all residents could use. There are a number of lounges and day rooms spread across the building, so residents will have a choice as to where they would want to go and sit and spend their time. The next few slides show the floor plans for the care home. So these, you can see, these are all ensuite bedrooms, single occupancy bedrooms. But as you can see on this ground floor, we've got a fairly large, sizable day space lounge at one end of the building. This would have access onto the area of open space. We've then got another area here. This is the main area where residents would eat. There's also other facilities on the ground floor, such as a salon for nail and hair appointments, and then there's more management areas where staff have their facilities in terms of admin office and kitchen space. So moving through to the next slide, again, this shows more rooms, and there's more spaces here, at least 3 or 4 day rooms on this level as well as then the outside space within the balconies. This is the top floor. Again, more day room space and a large roof terrace at one end. I don't know if you can see that because that's better. Yeah, large roof terrace here. That shows the roof plan. The next slide show street scenes of the 19 residential units to the north of the site. So the street scene along the top, so units 1 to 6 or 1 to 4, and then 5 and 6 are ghosted at the back here, and then these units along the bottom here, so 15 through to 19, they're the units that would run along the main spine of the access road as it comes in off of Church Lane. Units 5, 6 and 7 are located to the north, and 14 and 15 are located to the south, close to the care home. And then plots 9 through to 13 run along the eastern boundary of the site. So you can see from these street scenes there is a variety. We've got a mixture of bungalows and then 1.5 storey properties and then full two storey properties here. This next slide shows you details of the single garages that are proposed and also the substation and garden store for the care home. The next few slides show photographs of the application site. These were taken fairly recently, so during the summer, so the grass has grown and some of the trees are in need of a haircut. But this will give you an impression of the existing buildings on the site, which are all to be removed, and I'll also point out the trees that are going to be retained. So these photographs. This tree here is to be retained, but these existing buildings, as I've mentioned, are going to be removed. And this is looking towards the west of the site. This top photograph here is looking towards the access road that serves the doctor's surgery. So all of these trees on the right-hand side of the photograph will be retained. Some of them are in need of some trimming up because they have been left for a while, but we have received a retention plan, a tree retention plan, sorry, which our landscape officer is satisfied with. And some smaller species are to be removed, but they are to ensure that larger, more prominent species on the site can then flourish. Again, this is looking towards Church Lane, so you can just about make out the hoarding there. Some of you may well have seen that if you've driven past the site recently. So these trees here that are inside the hoarding are to be retained. There are some fairly sizable conifers kind of between the hoarding and the brick wall, and those conifers, a number of those are to be removed as they have no real value within the street scene and will actually improve the growing conditions for some of the other existing trees that are to be retained. Again, these are photographs of these trees here are to be retained, and you can just see in the background of both of these photographs some low-level buildings which are to be removed. And as far as we know, this poor tree here is beyond saving, unfortunately, and so that one will be coming down. So these photographs here are kind of stood within the tree, the large vegetation site at the front of the site. So these will all be retained. The grass here, as I say, is fairly long. It was probably about 1 foot tall when we walked through here. This will be mown, and so it will make access by both the residents of the 19 dwellings and also the care home will make access to it a lot easier. Moving on, some more of the trees that are going to be retained, and then in this top photograph you can see the existing buildings that are going to be removed. This is at the frontage of the site, the main access that will serve the dwellings. Again, this building here will be removed, but the tree, as you can see here, that will be retained. Again, some other photographs of tree species that will be retained within the site. I'm now thinking maybe I have too many photographs of trees, but the more the merrier. It's quite nice to know that they're going to be retained on site. So this last photograph here shows the tall tower that most of us associate with the college site, and then a fairly sizable tree here, which does require some pruning, but that will be retained as part of this application. And all of these buildings in the foreground and the background will all be removed. So I have some updates for members. It looks quite scary, but bear with me. So the first one is in condition 14, which is on page, find where that is, page 92 of the agenda. It's just updating the drawing number that is referred to in that condition. It should be revision D, but in the printed agenda it does say revision A. So that's one amendment. Condition 7, which is on page 89, which is a fairly standard request from the archaeological team at Essex County Council, where they require the submission of a written scheme of investigation. That has actually already been submitted to Essex County Council, and they have confirmed that they are happy with the written scheme of investigation that's been submitted to them. So the wording of that condition has been amended slightly so that the works are carried out in accordance with that written scheme of investigation, rather than requiring it to be submitted, because that job has already been done. The next bullet point just refers to the approved drawings, which are listed, I think, at the beginning of the report. Yeah, so they cross 2 pages, 87 and 88. There are 3 drawings there where the revisions just required a small update to H, L and K. We also have had a arboricultural implications assessment that has been submitted recently to the local authority. As I mentioned within my my presentation, the landscape officer is content with that detail, so that will form an additional approved document. I've also added an additional condition requiring works to be carried out in accordance with that assessment, but I'll move on to, I've got that referred to on a later slide. An additional condition has been is proposed here regarding landscaping and tree protection. So this is our standard landscaping condition that will be imposed. And then moving on to the last slide of updates is that this condition requiring works to be carried out within in accordance with that AIA will also be added. One final amendment is the trigger for condition 15, which has been reworded to the following: to allow some works to commence on site prior to a detailed remediation scheme being submitted to the environmental health team. I've had confirmation this morning that the environmental health team are happy with this revised wording, so if members are content, condition 15 will be amended to the following on the slide. And condition 15 is on page, where are we? 93. So moving on, there is a section 106 which is currently being drafted, and these are the heads of terms. So we have a healthcare financial contribution, so over £17,000 towards the refurbishment of the first floor of the Church Lane surgery. There is also the provision of the on-site public open space, and probably more importantly is the appointment of a management company to ensure that that public open space is then maintained correctly. There's also a financial contribution towards the open spaces outside of the site. So there's £17,000, just over £17,000 towards the repair of an existing boardwalk within Glebe Woods. There is also the age restriction, which it's set out there, and then the RAMS contribution, and the scheme is yet to be confirmed for that. Sorry, members. The application site lies within the town boundary of Braintree, adjacent to the Bradford Street Conservation Area, and therefore the principle of development and the redevelopment of this site is considered appropriate. The development would provide 19 dwellings to all the housing supply, and also a 75-bed care home. Officers, as set out within the committee report, officers and the applicant have worked very hard, particularly during lockdown, to achieve the layout and the house and care home design that you have before you this evening, and we consider that the design of the proposed layout to be appropriate, along with the design of the dwellings and the care home themselves. There would be jobs created during the construction phase, and a large area of mature planting to the front of the site will be retained. The proposed development would therefore constitute sustainable development in the planning balance, and it's therefore recommended that planning permission is granted and officers seek a resolution to grant planning permission subject to the completion of the Section 106 and the amended and additional conditions referred to earlier in this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Melanie, I think it would have been quite helpful if we could have had those updates emailed to them. There are just so many to take into consideration at such short notice, even if they've been sort of just prior to the meeting, because there are a lot of them to read and it's not easy, if you don't mind me saying that. So let's go over to Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a stroll down memory lane for me personally. This is a previously developed site and within the development boundary, therefore there must be a presumption in favour of development, and this development seems appropriate. Maybe it's a contribution to lifelong learning. One can hope. It's sad to see the bulk of the sort of college site disappear, but it's almost inevitable since the transfer to Colchester Institute, and old hands have been anticipating this for some time. I mean, there are some real positives, I think, about this proposal. It's good to see that so much of the college grounds is preserved in the open space. There are some really good trees there, and very fine mature trees, and the tertiary college was very proud of them, and in fact did quite a lot of work on them to get them into good shape. I think there's been good progress on the 19 units, and you've introduced variety there, which is much to be preferred, I think, than a sort of collection of uniform bungalows. So that is also, I think, a positive. There is one quibble that I would have if I am allowed one, and that is the provision of parking on the site. I think that maybe the developers tried to finesse this a bit. The college site is not well served by bus services, as is stated in the report. In fact, there's only one useful bus service, and that's the sort of the 89, which was hourly. Local residents will know that Church Lane is notorious as being a bus-free zone. If you ever have conversation with residents of Church Lane, they will tell you that in no uncertain terms. And that is why there's such a strain on parking at the Church Lane surgery, because it's very difficult to access this site by bus. And I guess you will also have picked up the public's discontent with the parking arrangements for the surgery, which I can't see being improved by this. But that is one point that you take on in the sort of the balance of the development as a whole, which I think is entirely acceptable for the site. But for reasons of nostalgia, I won't move, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. I have no one else wishing to speak on this item at the moment, Councillor Mann, so you might have to move it. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll come to yours and Councillor Mann's rescue. I think it's a slightly unusual application in a way, because we're looking at the demolition of former college buildings and a completely different type of development in its place. But we've gained the STEM centre, which is excellent. And I do think there is a need certainly within this district for good quality, well-designed care homes, which it looks to me as though it's going to be, with the addition of the 19 sort of age-restricted dwellings, which I think is interesting. So I'm entirely in favour. I do share Councillor Mann's concerns about parking, and I note that in the some of the comments in the report from residents, which were mostly, I have to say, extremely positive, someone did say they were concerned about the addition to traffic, particularly of ambulances, which unfortunately is a feature of care homes. People, they do need ambulances from time to time, and that would not sort of assist with any parking and traffic problems, and I do tend to agree with that. However, I note that highways have made no objections. Officers are satisfied that there is sufficient parking for it not to be a strong enough objection. And elsewhere in the district, an inspector was happy with a slightly lower provision of parking for another care home. So I don't think we've got a particularly strong point to make there, but I do understand and appreciate residents' concerns on that point. Other than that, I think it's been well thought through, and obviously they have worked hard with officers to make all the good points and make this acceptable. So I'm happy to approve officers' recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Does it find a seconder?
Second.
Sorry, I had it. I have to take Councillor Johnson because I heard him loudest. Thank you. Councillor Johnson, do you wish to speak?
Just to add a note of nostalgia, most people know the college very well. I certainly attended in later life, and to the horror and embarrassment of my son, who was a student there, he saw me there and quickly walked past the classroom. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, just want to echo the words of Councillor Mann about the design, and well done for officers and applicant for working together to produce what I think is a pretty good design. Really nice, nice houses, and it was always difficult to produce a design for a sort of block like that. But I think the way that it's been broken up has made it quite an attractive, will be quite attractive building, especially when it's surrounded by all the trees that have been carefully planted and nurtured over the years, and will therefore be for everybody to enjoy. So that's great. The only question I have is, this is probably going to be a standard answer to this, but an age restriction of 55 seems very young, Melanie. Is that a standard thing that when you get to 55 you're entitled to move into a care home? I wonder if you could just answer that question.
Would you like to answer, Melanie?
Well, it gives me something to look forward to, although my husband will be there before me. Well, the age restriction is for the dwellings, not for the care homes. So, and it was the age was put forward to us by the applicant. So, I don't have a kind of a view either way. As far as I understand, it does seem to be a fairly standard age that does seem to come forward when there is going to be a restriction on occupation based on age. Beyond that, I don't know if Chris has any further views on. No, he's shaking his head. He's not being very helpful. It just seems to be that that's a fairly standard standard age when it is put forward as a restriction. I have seen it on other sites, you know, either not so much perhaps around the district, but where you see age restrictions on developments.
I think we had that kind of same age restriction on one we approved in Halstead several years ago. And when you get to my age, you get these kind of people writing to you saying, come and live in our care home and come and live. And they all say you have to be over 55. And I get quite a lot of them, but I just put them in the bin. Thank you. Well, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application. And I think everyone that has registered speaker spoken. Or I'm going to put that to the vote then that this is for approval. Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
And Councillor Wrench.
For.
Thank you. Thank you, members. That application has been granted. Members, I was considering taking a break at this stage, but I've been informed that the next item might only take 25 to 30 minutes. So I think best if we did plod on if possible. But could someone move standing orders just in case we go slightly over the 10:15?
Happy to move, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Does it find a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you. So we will proceed. So we now come on to the application, and I would application 20005624 Newlands Farm, Station Road, White Notley. We do not have any speakers on this application. It's going to be presented by Andrew Martin. This is Andrew's first attendance at the Planning Committee, so I would like to welcome him and ask him to make his presentation. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, members. I hope you have a good evening, and I'll try and keep this as brief as possible now to see this committee through. I'm just going to open up my screen. Okay. So you should all now see the presentation. As Chair has noted, it's for an application at Newlands Farm in Station Road, White Notley. The proposal relates to the demolition of existing buildings and the construction of 2 new dwellings. But I'll come on to this in a few moments, but just to touch on it briefly, the proposal is in part a replacement dwelling and in part a new dwelling. This is an aerial image of the site. The area outlined in red represents the concentration of the area subject to the most of the development. You can see that the buildings on the site present are set back from Station Road by approximately 50 metres. This site has been previously granted an existing lawful development certificate, establishing part of one of the buildings as a dwelling where it had been occupied in breach of plan control for a period of 10 or more years. To the north of the site, as you can see, is White Notley train station. To the south of that is Station House, and the area indicated on blue there is where a new dwelling was previously approved on the land to the rear of Station House. It's noted that there has been a subsequent application at the land to the rear of Station House for 3 new dwellings. That was refused on the basis of 4 grounds, one of which pertained to potential hazard caused to the crossing at White Notley Station, which would have been as a result of a new access proposed onto Station Road. So it's worth noting in the context of the application before you that the access to the site for the current application is existing and is shared with the site to the north, which is this area here at Newland as well. It's known as Newland, and the site is Newlands Farm. So briefly moving on to the site location plan, this shows the wider site and the area subject to demolition are these buildings here. It's worth noting at this stage that one of the conditions for this application will be altered in content slightly by the fact that since the agenda has been published, this buildings to be demolished key has been added. So in essence, it represents a change from one version to another, but no substantive change other than an annotation. This is simply a close-up of the building to be demolished, and it sets out in a bit more detail what the various uses are in those buildings. And you can see there that that is the area that was previously granted an existing lawful development certificate for use as a dwelling, which is attached to the cart lodge, which is open, some stables, which are single story also, and the larger barn, which occupies the front portion of the site. Moving on to the elevations, as you can see at present, they're relatively simplistic and functional in form. You've got the larger barn in combination with the single story built form adjacent to it, with the dwelling here, the cart lodge and the stables, and just the various elevations there. And again, this is the floor plans, which provides a bit more of an indication of how the accommodation is laid out at present. So you can see the sort of this area occupied at present by the lawful dwelling and also the various other buildings adjoining to it. Moving on to the proposed site plan, again, just a note that this is another drawing that an annotation was added to post the agenda being circulated and publicised, and the annotation simply alludes to the fact that the yellow lines that you may roughly be able to see around the unit and the blue line around the stables dwelling, that they represent the boundaries of the respective dwellings, just for completeness. So as you can see there, the buildings to be demolished have been removed. The barn and the existing dwelling have been replaced by a barn and a single story adjoining to it. And the cart lodge has been removed from there, and the stables have been formed into a new development that would replace the existing stables in a U shape with a central courtyard and the existing agricultural building, which is to be retained here. Both dwellings are, as you can see, served by ample amenity space well in excess of the required standard. A new egress would be created around the site for the front dwelling to enable access to the rear of the site, and there are existing trees along the front of the barn here which provide screening from Station Road that would be retained, and some new mixed native hedging would be proposed around the egress to soften its impact. This is just a note of an additional condition that's going to be attached, or is proposed to attach if members are minded to agree with officer's recommendation. At present, as you would have seen the last slide, which I'll refer back to, there's existing trees along the front of the barn here, and in the bottom right hand corner of the proposed site location plan drawing, there's this separate excerpt which shows 2 parking spaces proposed where the trees are currently located, and so for completeness, whilst there's 2 spaces that aren't in that area that could adequately serve the dwelling, would be compliant with the parking standards, it is proposed to attach a condition which I'll come to the wording for later, to say that the details of the parking arrangement shall be secured via a suitably worded condition. In terms of the elevations, the barn has replicated the form and massing and scale of the existing barn. It's maintained its traditional and simplistic appearance with an equal distribution of windows and openings across most elevations. The southeast elevation here has notably got no windows at first floor level to avoid any unnecessary or undue overlooking of the second dwelling proposed to the southeast of it. And just a note that the high quality materials are proposed in the form of natural slates, black timber weatherboarding and black timber windows. The floor plans for the dwelling, the barn, simply show the quantum of accommodation sought, which is quite a large amount, but nonetheless is suitably laid out with high standard of amenity proposed. moving on to the stables, this is perhaps slightly larger than the existing stable block that's there, but is still modest in scale, height and massing. Again, with a simplistic elevational design that wouldn't detract from the character of the area and would assimilate into its surroundings nicely. And as you can see, it's got limited number of openings on the northeast elevation to preclude any overlooking of the garden to the neighbouring dwelling proposed, and it's considered that a suitable boundary treatment on the edge between the two dwellings could also mitigate against any overlooking. Again, just the floor plans for stable dwelling, just showing the general arrangement which officers are satisfied is acceptable, and both dwellings appear to meet the NDSS standard in terms of floor area. So briefly moving on to the site photos, this is from Station Road at the access to the site, viewing into the site, and you can see there's a line of trees there which nicely screen the existing built form. This is just a view over the area that would be, as it were, the egress would go round it. So this bit would remain laid to rough grassland, with the egress to the rear dwelling cutting across the front of the site and going around the trees. Or believe actually it would come in front of those trees that you can see there in the background. And this is just a wider shot of the access showing the entirety of it, which is shared with the neighbouring property. And just a view down Station Road towards White Notley, which is approximately 400 metres away to the edge of the settlement boundary. And this is from further down Station Road, close towards White Notley, viewing upwards along Station Road. So you can see there that there's quite a substantial buffer of landscaping along the east side of the road there that would prevent it being viewed, being prominent in public views. And this is just a photo taken from the access looking towards the station and crossing. And it's along here where there was previously proposed 3 dwellings, which were refused, with a new access, I believe, coming through the hedgerow somewhere along that side of the road. And this is a view towards the site immediately opposite at the Land to the River Station Road, where somewhere around here there was previously a new dwelling that was approved. This is the egress into the existing site where the lawful dwelling is currently situated, and that's viewing towards Station Road. That is the existing barn, and here it's starting to merge into the lawful dwelling, which again is shown here in slightly more of it. That's the dwelling there, and this is the cart lodge. And this is the stable block at present, which, as you can see, has got a relatively shallow pitched roof, but is nonetheless still quite one of the more substantial buildings in this area of previously developed land. And that's the stable from the rear. And that is the existing outbuilding that is proposed to be retained to the southeast of the U-shaped dwelling, which officers have reviewed and considered that, given its scale and proximity, wouldn't have a negative impact on the amenity of the new U-shaped dwelling, albeit future occupants could remove this building without requiring plan permission. But it is considered that it would likely be used for storage ancillary to the residential dwelling. And that's just a view looking towards White Notley. So as you can see, that's the general landscape setting outside the confines of the site. So to summarise, the benefits materialising from the scheme would be close proximity to a sustainable mode of transport accessible at White Notley train station. There would be economic benefits materialising during construction and post-occupation. Social benefits would materialise from the creation of 2 well-designed dwellings, and there would be 1 net dwelling increase towards the housing supply by virtue of the fact that one of the dwellings to be replaced is existing. So it's just 1 net new dwelling. The limited harms identified would be that the site is located in the countryside outside of the village envelope of White Notley, and there would be a degree of dependence on private car use. Overall, officers consider that the benefits of the proposal would outweigh the harms in the tilted balance, and officers recommend approval subject to the condition for the parking arrangement to be secured, which I've got on the following slide here. So relatively uniform condition, simply requiring that the parking arrangement shown on the proposed site plan is not approved, and that no above ground development should commence until the proposed parking layout for the barn, details of that have been submitted to and approved in writing, and that it should be retained thereafter permanently as such. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak? Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wasn't necessarily expecting to speak or go first, but I'm happy to. Well, there is at least sort of partial acceptance of residential development on this site because of the 2018, I think it is, application for a lawful development certificate for existing use, which was granted. I personally think the designs are quite acceptable. The site is obviously, I think, untidy, I'm not putting it kindly at the moment, so it would certainly be an improvement. And to be honest, actually, this is only really on the agenda tonight because the parish council have objected contrary to officers' recommendation. I don't think there are any planning reasons to object to it. It's accepted. I think there will be car use, but that is not untypical of this type of development on a site like this. I know there are plenty of times where we feel justified in turning down developments because of car use, but I think in this case that's not a strong consideration. So all in all, I think good report, and thank you to Andrew for his very good and clear presentation, and I'm happy to support officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
You're moving it, are you, Councillor?
Sorry, yes, I meant to say I'm moving it.
Yeah, sorry, I know it's getting late.
No, I know.
Do I find a seconder before I move on?
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I have Councillor Mann wishing to speak. Do you wish to speak as well, Councillor Johnson?
No, I don't, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Mann.
Happy to support this, Chair. My eyebrows did rise when I saw six bedrooms, but within the context of the site, it's I think quite an acceptable use of existing buildings, and yes, it is not isolated, but made sustainable, I think, by the proximity to the station. Although the services is pretty limited from there, it does give you an option to use of the car should you need it. So I mean, all in all, and on balance, I think a perfectly acceptable application, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Well, no one else has indicated they wish to speak, and it has been moved by Councillor Mrs. Spray, seconded by Councillor Johnson. So I'm going to put it to the vote, and this is to vote for approval with the additional condition that will be added regarding the parking. Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
And Councillor Wrench.
For.
Thank you, members. That application has been granted unanimously. And that brings us to the end of our planning meeting for this evening. I'd like to apologise that I had problems with the internet, but I used the old adage, switch everything off and switch it all on again, and it worked on both times. So that's the only way I could think of doing anything. So I do apologise, especially for those watching on YouTube, especially as it's the first time we've been using Zoom for planning. Something did have to go wrong. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance, and I will close the meeting at 21:56. Over to Emma.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And again, thank you, members, for your understanding and patience this evening. As the Chairman did explain, we do have these glitches time to time, and your support and patience is always very much welcomed. Before I ask the webcast officer to terminate the broadcast, I'd ask members to complete the short survey that we've emailed you this evening. It's very important for us to receive your feedback as we go forward. I'd also like to remind you that the Council will be retaining performance data relating to your connections to this meeting in the event of a legal challenge to the way that we've held this meeting this evening. Thank you very much for bearing with us this evening, and good night. Please could the webcasting officer confirm that the YouTube broadcast has stopped.